So I wanted to start by saying it couldn't have been more perfect following Kayla, who was talking a lot about stress and burnout. All of us as women in education, both Deb, Catherine, and I have experienced some of that stress and burnout. And I think that with this year being a pandemic year, there's certainly been a lot of that for everyone, but women especially over the last year. So a little bit about us. I think Catherine said that. Catherine and I are longtime friends, longtime colleagues. We've spent the better part of our careers actually working together. And she was my champion who encouraged me to complete my doctorate over the last year. So we've known each other a really long time, and we've walked this road together as well. Deb and I are new friends actually over the last year, and we came together virtually. We both have the same leadership coach, and then that leadership coach brought a group of women together who were experiencing transition and change in their leadership. And so we gathered monthly with a group of amazing women, and we're able to talk through some of the challenges that we were facing in regards to change, our experiences. So our presentation is rooted in that work, this power of gathering together, talking about the challenges, and really supporting and championing one another. So I wanted to take a minute and just, stop and reflect about what your goals are for our session. We're only here for a real brief time. And just understanding that you have a reason for being here today. Something has led you to this space and to this session and to this group. And what would you also like to accomplish in our time and space together? You can feel free to put that in the chat, or you can just put that on a piece of paper, or you can just keep that in your mind, whatever that is for you, whatever works for you. So we're going to talk today about how we came to make some pretty significant changes in our lives as women in leadership and women in education. All of us have come through change. Some of us are still in the midst of change. And, it's a very difficult thing. For some people, change is something that is scary, something that is difficult, but for others, it's something we embrace and something that challenges us. So we're going to speak to our experiences today, and we're going to encourage you to share yours as well. Sorry. So I'd like to start by talking about what propelled our change together. So Deb, would you mind starting with where you are, where you came from, what really pushed you to make some pretty significant changes in your life?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And I'm glad your Wi-Fi is working. So good morning from Washington, D.C. area. I'm here from Fairfax, Virginia. And I put in the chat that I'd love to know where you all are kind of listening from, because I do know that sometimes some of these women ed groups are from all over the world. So I'm just curious, where are you from? And I'm seeing Rockville, Maryland, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, great, DC area, wonderful. So first of all, my name is Debbie Lane. I am CEO of Lane Leadership Group. I have done consulting for the last about 8 years, but I've had an amazing career where things, a lot of times situations have changed my journey, I guess, and my overall message is that one of the wonderful things about education is that we can really diversify our careers in many different trajectories. And that's definitely happened for me. I never planned to be a teacher. I went into the business school at Baylor University in Texas, thinking I was going to go into business, and I just didn't like it. And the career counselor told me, why don't you check out education? And my mom always wanted my sister and I to be a nurse and a teacher. And so therefore, I definitely did not want to do that. And it was just kind of funny because I ended up going into education. And at the time in Texas, it was very in to buy these antique bathtubs and put them in kindergarten and first grade rooms and put tons of books in the bathtubs and read to kids. It was just a thing back then. I don't know if it still is in Texas, but I have these wonderful memories in Waco, what we called Waco, Texas, working with kids and teachers, and so much has changed since then. Came back up to the East Coast where I'm from. It was very hard at the time to get a teacher position. I ended up waiting tables and waited on a principal who listened to my story and said, come in tomorrow and I'll hire you as an instructional assistant and I'll help you get a teaching job. And I'm still in touch with her 30 years later today. She really helped me, and I got a 6th grade teaching position, eventually was introduced into curriculum work, did a degree in curriculum work, and then went into ed leadership work because another principal tapped me to go into a cohort program and do ed leadership. I never saw myself as a principal. So all along the way, diversifying and just having people see something in me that I could always see in myself. And that has really made me want to be a mentor to other people throughout my career. Recently, a couple nights ago, I had dinner with my niece, who is now a teacher. And she was already telling me after her first year of teaching, she's extremely burned out. And so this summer, she's working really hard not to get on all the teacher sites, to just take a break from everything. And I was pointing out to her that, currently I'm helping work with the Virginia Department of Education and overseeing all kinds of work with the stimulus monies right now. And never did I see myself in development and financial pieces, but that's been part of my journey. So as we look at how we're going to diversify and look at the possibilities, you just continue to keep your mind open on what's possible. And that's what I would say.
Thanks, Deb. I think probably all of us have been, I know I have similar experience with you of being tapped and having other people seeing that potential in me that maybe I didn't see in myself for leadership as well. And I'm guessing others in the group have felt the same. Catherine, can you talk a little bit about what pushed you to make a pretty significant change in your life?
Yeah, I was like Deb, I fought my parents who wanted me to be a teacher for a long time and worked in insurance, believe it or not. Because I had a teaching degree, I had the opportunity to do a lot of professional development in the insurance world. But the travel, the distance from my family made me give that up and go back and become a true classroom teacher, which I loved. But at this point, I was more mature than some of my newer colleagues, and I had had some business experience, which I'm happy about because it gave me some of those customer service, negotiation, soft skills work, which translates very easily communication skills into the classroom. Very quickly tapped to go into leadership. A wonderful opportunity to not only get a K-12 teaching degree, but an adult education degree because I knew I wanted to work with adults. Very quickly tapped to become an administrator, and then my dream job came up, which was running a leadership and development department. Sadly, like many people, you try and juggle it all, and my body decided we're not going to do this anymore, and I got Crohn's disease, cancer, had to have a hysterectomy while doing my doctorate all at the same time, and my body said, nope, not going to happen. And I never was able to fill my battery. I was never able to recharge my battery each summer. And again, very happily, some lovely people who believed in me more than I believed in myself gave me an opportunity to start becoming an adjunct professor at the local university, which I absolutely adored. While I loved being a principal and working at many schools with diverse communities, I knew the greatest difference I could make in education was with pre-service teachers. And that opportunity led me, believe it or not, to leave Canada. And I am now sitting in Spokane, Washington at Gonzaga University as a professor here, working with pre-service and graduate students in education. So it's been a long journey, all in education, but it was these building blocks that led me to be able to be where I am today. And I could not be be more mentally, physically, and emotionally happy that I am working in higher education now.
So I think it's really interesting. None of us have had very conventional paths. Myself, my initial foray into the world of work was in social work. And I actually worked as a counselor for abused women in a shelter as a 23, 24-year-old recent graduate. And remember standing there thinking, what do I know and what do I have to contribute to the lives of these women? How could I, at my age, with very limited experience, support them when they need it? And decided at that particular point that I was going to make a change. And so I left that position and went and worked for the physical and health education consultant in Guelph, Ontario, on a contract position, and thought, wow, I sort of like this. You know, we were doing a little bit of a road show, like Catherine, a professional learning road show, with a leading expert in sex education because there was such a high rate of teen pregnancy in that particular area, and thought, wow, I think I want to do either public health or education, and decided at that point to go back and do my master's in teaching degree at Edinburgh. And I think one of the things that really propelled me was I had a really strong mentor when I was at Edinburgh. One of my professors, Dr. Kathleen Benson, was a wonderful model for me as a woman in leadership, the ability to sort of balance everything and to really go for what you wanted and have a really strong voice. And from there, it was sort of a difficult time. And I also didn't get a teaching job right away. So I ended up working in early childhood education, got married, moved to Wisconsin, had a baby, started a new job as a middle school teacher, and moved back to Canada. And about 10 years into my time in Canada, another woman principal tapped me and said, hey, I think you should be a vice principal. And I loved my job as vice principal and principal, but I was in really challenging schools. And at my last school, it was the most difficult place I'd ever worked. And I was burned out. I was so burned out. My stress level was so high, juggling being a mom of 2 kids who were in travel sports in a high needs school with a husband that traveled. I was not doing well. And I think Catherine and a lot of our other friends really noticed that. And I got a lot of, are you okay? And I'm like, as we talked about Martyr, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's good. You know, I'm all good, but I wasn't. And I was finding that I was not able to do what I wanted to do or have the possibilities or challenges that I wanted. So I left. I resigned from a position, and like Deb, I went overseas and I became an international school principal for 3 years. And then last year returned to the US as COVID hit and resigned from that position because I didn't want to be away from my family in China. Took a year to complete my doctorate, and then here I am just starting 1 week into my new job in Metairie, Louisiana, another place I never thought I would be. So all of these things, you know, these physical, these social, these emotional challenges that we have are reasons we've moved. We all wanted to take control of our own careers and our futures. And I think we were really motivated by creating a legacy, wanting to really make a mark, change the landscape for leadership, for education, and really be creative and innovative and imagine new possibilities. These are just some of the main reasons that we wanted changes. So with change, there's always obstacles and challenges. It's not something that you can do without intention. None of us made these changes just flying by the seat of our pants. So Deb, could you share some of the challenges you found in your change?
Yes, so some of the challenges I would say, first of all, some of the challenges were with myself, even though some of these people, these leaders saw leadership abilities in myself. I definitely over time had suffered from imposter syndrome, where I questioned, gosh, I don't see those things in myself. And I think a lot of women do deal with a lot of imposter syndrome, where we question we're as good as people think we are. So I really had to work on that, and that's something I continue to work on. I actually co-wrote a book that's coming out in March 2022 about international school leaders who have really worked hard in international circumstances with politics, with professional issues, to overcome imposter syndrome. And there's professional learning after each one of the stories. And in learning that, it was, you know, in writing the book, this anthology of women's stories, it was really helpful to hear other stories and how they've had to overcome that imposter syndrome. The other thing I would say that has been a challenge is, and I think the three of us have felt this, we at various times were in organizations where other women stifled our growth or saw us as a threat. And so they didn't promote us, or we were not included. And unfortunately, there are other women that are very competitive amongst women to women. And I really am hopeful that we're going to see more partnerships. I was talking with Anne-Marie earlier this morning about warm demanders. What was it? Warm demanders, right, Anne-Marie? And just how we can really work on some of these equity pieces and help one another instead of seeing each other as competing against one another. And I think how the three of us have reacted to it is, you know what, I've grown as much as I can in this organization, and the writing's on the wall at this point. And so that was actually one of the reasons that I left and went overseas. I had always wanted to go overseas. I started applying, and the situation really worked out beautifully for my family, and my two children got to go to school in Shanghai, one of the best schools in the international world, the Shanghai American School, and they really flourished, and it's impacted their life. So I think that as you recognize some of the obstacles, it's important to name it and say what it is and get real with it and learn to overcome it.
Catherine?
Yeah, the same was for me too. I appreciate that Deborah said you kind of outgrow where you were. For me, a quote that resonates with my thoughts on why I've chosen to make some big changes is, if you feel people don't value your voice, it's time to find new people. You shouldn't have to feel devalued or silenced. I felt not heard in a lot of places I've worked. Not that I'm loud and obnoxious, but I wanted to contribute. I wanted to contribute positively. I got a doctorate so that I could feel I had some credibility, that I had, you know, research behind my thoughts and data to prove decisions and choices and things I wanted to contribute to. But I was in a location that had an all boys club, that you got labeled if you were a problem and then punished for it. That was my doctoral work. And I just knew that I continued to be unwell, emotionally, physically, and mentally. And I was about to turn 50, and I just knew there was no way I was going to spend the rest of my career feeling tamed, disrespected, etc. And I knew I moved on. Ironically, as you move on to a new place, new city, new career, especially in higher ed, you then get labeled the junior faculty. And that drove me nuts for a while, because I'm like, I'm 50 years old, how am I a junior person? But recognizing you do have to start over, you do have to earn people's trust and respect. And while it was hard, it was so rewarding. And I still, to this day, even though it took me 107 applications to get into higher ed, it's the best thing I've ever done for me personally at this time in my life, for my emotional, mental, and physical health.
For me, it's been about my family, and just the geography of managing that. My family is not a very traditional family. My husband has a rather unique job that he travels around the world. Both my children were involved in a lot of sports. And so it was always that struggle between balancing the needs of my family, my desire to grow and develop in my career, making some of those, sacrifices, and that dual role of mother, leader, teacher, all those roles and how they competed, that was a big challenge for me. I'm also in a space where I have aging parents, so there's always, and I know Catherine's there and Deb there too, we're always balancing that guilt of being the dutiful daughter and making sure that our parents are cared for. So that was a big challenge for me. Moving across the continent to China was a big piece, and leaving 2 children in university at that particular time, and a husband who was traveling, and parents, that was a challenge, and just that back and forth piece. And then COVID for me, I resigned from my job. I had every intention of returning back to China, but unfortunately, COVID had different plans for me, and the idea of not being able to leave China to get back to be with my family was something I just, as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, as a friend, could not really manage. So I chose to take the year and really step back and review and refine and revise what my plans are. And so those were some of the major challenges that I have. Deb, how did you go about making a plan for change?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that several of you, thank you, Emery, have dropped a couple comments in, and I think that if you have had imposter syndrome, I'd love to hear about it. I'm considering writing another book on how men could partner more with women in different ways in the education field, in leadership, and so it's something that I have a lot of interest in. I would say one of the things in going about making a plan for change, when I was an interim principal at a school that did not match my values, and so I was super happy that the contract was interim and it was only 1 year. But at the same time, I also wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. And several of my kind of inner circle colleagues and mentors, as well as my sister, had said, you know, you've always talked about starting a company, and you know, you've got all this different kinds of expertise, and maybe you should become a consultant. And it felt a bit like stepping off of a high dive, going into a very shallow pool. But what I did was I gave myself 6 months to come up with a plan, and I really worked at kind of chunking out time, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years on goals. I also did a lot of research, joined a lot of different groups to actively listen on the ground of what's going on with teachers, with principals, with instructional coaches and superintendents. And then I signed up for like a lot of webinars, as most of us do. And then I also leaned on, Anne-Marie and I talked about, we secured a leadership coach, Bridget Mcnamara. She runs Sidecar Counseling out of Holland, actually. And she's one of the most creative people I know. And I'm not trying to put a plug in here necessarily for Bridget. However, what she's done, I think, is pretty magical in that on each continent that she counsels, she's made these sidecar summits. And not only has Bridget's expertise been helpful, because I think we could all use a mentor throughout our career, and some of that leadership coaching, but she created these summits where there's no more than 6 to 8 women in a group. And I have found more inspiration in that group just because we've all kind of fed off of each other and pushed each other in ways that have been very different and very helpful. So we were just out at Red Lodge, Montana for that summit, and we hadn't met each other in person. And it was so fun. Most of the women are super tall. Almost six feet tall, 5'11", and I got out of my car and I'm 5'4", and I was like, holy cow, I had no idea you guys are so tall. But it was just really fun and wonderful to meet face to face after we've been online as a summit during COVID.
Catherine, can you talk a little bit about how you really dug into your knowledge, skills, and attitudes and what you discovered?
One of the things I've learned over the years is goal setting, and we were talking a lot in the chat about setting goals and how do you do that. And in order to reach a goal, you need to be competent and have competencies associated with that goal. And in order to be competent, you need to have balance in your knowledge, skills, and attitude related to that topic. So a silly example is you want to lose weight. You have lots of knowledge about how to do that. You have great skills on how to do that, but if your attitude's not right, you're never going to become competent in that. Same with other big goals in your life. And I had very intentionally used the Ontario Leadership Framework, which has 5 pillars of skills that administrators in Ontario need to perfect, manage, be proficient at. But then under each of those skills, it talks about each of those pillars. It talks about what is the knowledge base you need, the skills and opportunities, and more importantly, the attitude in order to do that. And I often spend most of my time whenever I'm up against a challenge, when I'm trying to reach a goal, is to make up, like you all have talked about, a pro-con list or positive negative. I do a KSA list. What's the knowledge I have associated with this opportunity? What are the skills that I need in order to be successful? And how's my attitude? It doesn't need to be adjusted. And that got me to a great place to be resilient, overcome some tough stuff with regards to not being picked for jobs that you wish, or being passed over for opportunities because I wasn't ready. I didn't have the proper attitude. I certainly wasn't as collaborative as I needed to be. And so I often coach people and say, what's your KSAs associated with this goal that you have? And it just seems to get people to be intentional about what are the gaps, where are their strengths, and who can they seek out in order to build up some of those missing pieces. But for me, 90% of the time it's my attitude. I'm not in a positive space. I'm overly confident. I'm not feeling that I have the skills. So just I love KSA, and if you ever want to talk about it more, please reach out.
So I think we're sort of coming to the end of our session, and we talked a lot about networks and coaching and finding your tribe. And this, Women's Ed is definitely one place to start. I think some of the highlights for us is this was a really intentional process. All of us had a bit of a different process, but it was really very intentional about how we went about making this change. So before you may find yourself at a crossroads right now, you really need to dig into what is your reason for change, what you might find as obstacles and challenges, and thinking about those personal obstacles and challenges as well as those professional obstacles and challenges, because change means risk. And you are the only individual at this particular space in your life that can decide if this risk is worth it for you. And everyone has different reasons for that. What are some intentional actions that you might take to make your change? And going back to what Catherine said, really digging into the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that you might need to learn or develop, and those that you already possess that may serve you well in a new role. And I would also say, who could you get as a coach, as a mentor, as a network, as a sponsor, or a champion for you moving forward in your work? So when we brought you together, we asked you to take a minute and revisit your intention. What then will be one action that you might take as the result of our session and time together here today? Put some resources here for you that you can have a look at. There's a lot of amazing groups that you can join, and we appreciate the time we've had together today. This is our contact information. We're all very, very available. If you wish to reach out, we're always looking for more people to join our tribe. Thank you very much for having us today.